This is Suzie Carr reading from The Curvy Side of Life. Chapter 1. Never, in Faith Miller's wildest dreams, did she ever imagine her life could end up so out of control. That first drop of trouble over a year ago compounded, and then all certainty in life buckled, collapsing faster than she could put it back together. It all started when her spouse of 10 years fell in love with a woman they worked with at the university. Next came the basement flood. After that, her layoff as a public relations specialist at the university happened. Oh, and then the squirrels. The fucking squirrels. On a drizzly morning, Faith sat on a sidewalk curb half a mile away from her home. She waited for a tow truck, which had already surpassed its promise of a 30-minute arrival. She stared at the smoldering giant nest on her car engine and groaned. Twigs, crunchy leaves, and white puffs of scratchy mattress stuffing smothered her engine. She expected a family of squirrels to pop out of its womb at any moment. She brushed a piece of lint off the sleeve of her new business suit and laughed at the absurdity of her situation. Her only interview since her layoff, and there she sat in the rain with no choice but to call and cancel. A few minutes later, the squeaking of the tow truck's brakes brought Faith out of her wallow. She climbed to her feet, pushing aside memories of her former life with its full bank account and ego intact, and opened her eyes to the foul diesel truck that would tow her broken car down the interstate. An eagerness rested on the kind face of the man who walked toward her. She latched onto it, grateful to see a friendly, familiar person. "Third time's a charm, eh?" he said, shaking her hand. Faith could only shrug. "Mothballs didn't work this time?" he asked. "No, they caused my lungs to freak out, and I ended up clinging to an oxygen mask in the emergency room. So no to mothballs." He offered an apologetic nod. "Well, I'll get it hooked up, and then we can get it off to the mechanic again." Again. Faith sat back down and watched as he examined the nest. Like the other 2 times, he pulled the nest apart and placed its contents into a trash bag. "The squirrel worked hard on this one," he said. Faith understood too well how hard those squirrels worked to keep their home intact, and how easily it could be destroyed. That afternoon, her sister Danielle called for their monthly check-in. "Why don't you and Bristol come spend some time down at the lake house this summer? You've never seen it, and it's been so long since we've gotten together." Faith guzzled wine and stole a glance of herself in the mirror by the patio door. Despite having smoothed her layers with a large barrel curling iron that morning, her natural waves, too dark and drab from lack of lowlights lately, spiraled more than usual around her shoulders. "I need to find a job." "Well, I have the internet here. We're not all sand and beach loungers. We even have a stove, refrigerator, and get this, electricity." "Way to win me over, sis," Faith said, wiping the smeared mascara from under her swollen dark eyes. "Seriously, sis, you've got the summer off, and it would do you good to get away from that place for a while." Faith hadn't taken an extended vacation in over a decade, well before graduate school. "I don't know. I could use the help at the salon." Faith laughed. "I haven't cut hair since high school. If I visited, and that's a big if, I'm not cutting hair. I'll need to be sending out resumes so I can earn some income." "Fine, send out resumes, and in between, we'll be silly. We'll drink wine, and you can watch me cut hair." "Can you put my life back together while you're at it?" she thought. "Well, I'll think about it." Faith looked at her watch. Stuart should have returned Bristol half an hour ago. He was probably helping a nice old lady put her groceries into the car. "Listen, Danielle, I have to get going. Bristol will be home any minute, and I need to cook some dinner for her. How's my little cutie pie niece doing?" Confused as ever, Faith thought. Well, yeah, she's doing fine." "Well, give her a big hug from her auntie and tell her I have a big, beautiful lake house that she can enjoy this summer if her mother decides they should have some fun." "Will do." "And sis," Danielle said, "have faith." She smiled at her sister's favorite closing line. "I love you," she said before hanging up. As the next hour passed and she waited on Stuart to bring Bristol home, she mulled over her sister's invite. Although a trip would do them good, and maybe even Danielle's magical soothing ability could get Bristol to start opening up again to the outside world, she needed to focus. One day, when she put her life back together, they'd take that trip. An hour later than scheduled, Bristol bolted through the front door with Stuart in her wake. "Mommy, look, I'm wearing lipstick." Her 7-year-old daughter had painted her tiny lips glossy pink. "You look beautiful, sweetheart." She hugged her daughter and kissed the top of her golden head of hair. She was a mini Stuart, with her light hair and blue eyes. "So Daddy bought you lipstick, huh?" "He didn't buy me lipstick, right, Daddy?" She backed out of Faith's embrace. Stuart's cheek flinched. Then it turned red. "No? Then where did you get it?" Faith remained cheerful for Bristol's sake. "Jilly gave it to me." Her cheeks pinked up in joy, innocent in her admiration for the woman who stole her daddy from her mommy. Faith glared at Stuart over Bristol's head. He began raking his hand through his thick head of hair. "Screw him," she thought. "Hey, guess what?" Faith smiled down at Bristol, taking her first bold step since the divorce. "You and I are going to take a trip to Rhode Island to see Auntie Danielle's lake house this summer." "For the whole summer?" Bristol asked. "For as long as we like." Faith tugged at Bristol's hand. "Come on, let's get you some dinner." Well, wait a minute. You can't take her away for as long as you like," Stuart said. Faith stopped and tightened her squeeze around her daughter's hand. "Sure I can. But what about my Saturday visitations?" "Oh, that's simple. You and your little girlfriend can drive down and see her on Saturdays." "Wait, that is not fair." "Well, it never is it?" Faith tugged Bristol along with her down the hallway. He mumbled something about the contractors needing time anyway to fix the basement flooring and walls from the flood they had suffered. 4 days later, she and Bristol packed up their rental and headed to Rhode Island. They both needed that trip. She recited this to herself for the entire 2-hour trip south from Boston. Time away from the problems of the failed marriage and her job loss would offer clarity, according to her best friend Sally. Faith sure hoped she was right. By noon, as she maneuvered the curvy roads of Rhode Island's South County, she relaxed. The air smelled as if it had been kissed by the sea. The plush green grass swayed on the front lawns of quaint lake homes with oversized porches adorned with colorful impatiens. The American flag waved at them from in front of every bay window. Children chased one another and dogs barked. The sun sparkled on the gorgeous leaves of maples and oaks. Faith forgot how special and welcoming the streets of Rhode Island could be in the summertime. She hadn't visited often since leaving nearly 13 years prior to attend graduate school in Boston. Stuart disliked Danielle's in-laws. Faith liked Danielle's mother-in-law, Lucia, but Danielle's sister-in-law, Martina, was kind of hard to take with her overbearing personality. With nothing but time on her hands now, she returned to her home state seeking nourishment, something she knew she'd never find in the cement landscape of downtown Boston. With each bend in the road, she prayed somewhere on the other side of those curves that her problems would disappear and she'd begin to reclaim a piece of herself. In the rearview mirror, Bristol looked so small, like a scared pup, wanting to remain in the comfort of a crate. Her baby blue eyes scanned the unfamiliar homes and people. "This is going to be a great summer," she said to Bristol. "I hope Auntie Danielle lets me play with her turtle." Ralph the turtle. Oh, they had pictures of him all over the side of their fridge. Danielle would send one with each letter she wrote to Bristol. "I'm sure if you ask your auntie, she'll say yes." Faith caught her daughter's glum stare through the rearview mirror. Her heart sank. Poor kid was afraid to speak to anyone besides her and Stuart. Bristol deserved more than a set of divorced parents and a future filled with uncertainty. Anything could happen, and quite frankly, that level of surprise freaked Faith out. When they arrived at Danielle's, Faith flung open her door and crawled out to stretch her cramped legs. Her sister ran toward her with open arms, and her happy dimples deepened along her cheeks. Her long, thick hair, now colored with a touch of golden brown, camouflaged the gray hair coming into her center part. Danielle's hippie style reminded Faith of better times filled with ice cream cones, roller skates, and hopscotch. "I've missed you so much," Danielle whispered as they embraced. Faith gulped back restrained tears. She fell deeper into her sister's hug, comforted by her familiarity and safety. Danielle pulled away and sought out Bristol. Yanking open the back door, Danielle's smile doubled in size. "Oh, my goodness, look at you!" She extended her hand, and to Faith's surprise, Bristol took it. When she climbed out of the car, Danielle bent down to her eye level. "Ah, you are so grown up." She ran her fingers through Bristol's golden curls. "Your hair! I'm so jealous. You didn't get those curls from me, though." Bristol's eyes warmed as she took in the welcome. Faith's heart ballooned. Danielle put her arm around Bristol's shoulder and urged her up the driveway. "How old are you again?" Bristol shrugged. Faith's heart deflated on a quick puncture. Ever since the marital tension began with Stuart 2 years ago, Bristol stopped talking to people. Would she ever find her voice again? "She's 7, Faith answered for her in a sing-song voice, even though Danielle already knew. "Oh, that's a great age," Danielle continued, leading her up the driveway toward the double garage where her Mercedes shined under the fluorescent lights. "When I was your age, I liked being a great listener, too. I can tell we're going to get along just great, you and me." She squeezed her shoulder and then set Bristol free. Only Bristol remained close to her aunt's side as she led them past the Mercedes and up a set of wooden stairs to the door. Once inside, the scent of maple and sugar greeted them. Aside from the ticking of the second hand on the hallway clock, the house sat silent. They proceeded down a side hallway, passing a bathroom and laundry room. Then the hallway opened up into her grand kitchen area, where beautiful copper pans hung above an island that included 5 large gas burners and an indoor grill. Tasteful brick dressed the walls and offered a cozy country charm to what would otherwise be too large of a space to call home. "Well, this is a far cry from Elm Street." Faith traced her finger along the granite countertop. "When you said you bought a lake house, I thought you meant one of those cottages that we stayed in as kids on Spring Lake." "Oh, yeah, I do miss those lumpy bunk beds and even the mildewed windows. The good old days." Danielle's voice filled with laughter as she picked up a plate of golden cookies and offered some to Bristol. Bristol looked to Faith with arched eyebrows. "Well, go ahead, sweetie. If you want a cookie, you can have one." Bristol snatched one up and then smiled at Danielle. "Enjoy," Danielle whispered. "It's so quiet," Faith whispered, and her voice echoed against the pitched ceiling. "For now," Danielle smirked and bit into a cookie. She handed one to Faith. Faith bit into a decadent, crunchy sugar cookie and circled her gaze around the open rooms. Peace and tranquility sifted its treasure on them. The trip would be exactly what they needed. "I should get the bags." Faith turned toward the garage door and noticed a Desiderata poem hanging on the wall. She had sent it after Danielle's husband Lucas passed away 10 years prior. Faith's note of encouragement hung next to it. They caught each other's eye, and in that moment, a tinge of sadness curled up around the sharp tick of the clock. Everyone missed Lucas, and no amount of cookies, smiling, or laughter would fill that loss. "I'll help," Danielle nudged Faith forward. "Bristol, I've left you a little surprise in your bedroom. Your room is up the stairs to the second landing, first door on the right. I hope you like pink rooms, because it's very pink." Bristol remained planted in the kitchen, nibbling on her cookie and staring wide-eyed at the vaulted ceilings. Danielle turned to Faith with a question sitting on her lips. "She'll be fine." Faith grabbed her sister's arm. "She needs time to warm up, that's all." Danielle's mouth twisted. "She'll come around, especially if you let her hang with Ralph. She gets a kick out of how he wanders around the house like a dog." Danielle stopped walking. "There's no more Ralph." "No more Ralph?" "He escaped." "How does a turtle escape?" "Lucia thought it would be a good idea to create a sanctuary for him on the side of the deck. A place he could sun himself and be in the wild, sort of. I mean, as wild as you can get in Rhode Island. So she placed huge flat rocks and planted tall marshy grasses. She even dug a shallow hole and placed a plastic pool in it from Walmart. Then one day out there, and he escaped." Danielle's zany mother-in-law, Lucia, was a hoot. My God, Lucia must have freaked out. Oh, she put up signs with a reward. Then a man called us and told us he found a turtle matching Ralph's description on the side of the street. So, not wanting Ralph to be run over, he brought him to the creek at the end of the cul-de-sac and released him. So, yeah, anyway, cheers to Ralph's freedom, right? She raised her hand up as if offering a chair. Freedom? Faith asked. He lived his entire life in a bathtub being fed fish food. The poor little fellow isn't going to know what to do out there on his own. Well, we looked for him. Lucia dove into the creek knee-deep in mud, searching for hours. Faith headed out the garage door. She really couldn't wait to see that turtle. A few moments later, they arrived at the back hatch of her rental SUV. Danielle hugged Faith again. Oh, I am so happy you came. It's been too long since we've seen each other. Well, never again, Faith said. I missed you way too much. They stood at arm's length and grinned. It's really good to be here. The frantic yelling of a woman chasing a tall and lanky hound dog in the street cut their reunion short. The dog stopped in front of the house next door. It sniffed a flattened plastic bottle. The dark-haired woman, wearing a pair of tight orange shorts and black tank top, fastened a leash to the dog's collar and released an exacerbated sigh. She waved to them, then turned and jogged with the dog back up the street. That's Yoga Goddess. Danielle watched them disappear over the hill. Yoga Goddess? Yeah, and I guess the neighbors must have hired her to walk their dog. Though I don't know, because nobody ever tells each other what's happening. Everyone's so secretive around here. Not at all like where we grew up on Rhodes Avenue, where everyone knew everyone's favorite drink or television show. Why Yoga Goddess? Oh, because Lucia, Martina, and I see her doing yoga every morning in the grass. Martina? Danielle nodded. Well, yeah, she lives down here with us now. After her divorce, it got kind of lonely for her in that big house in Lincoln. With her working at the salon, it's just easier for her to be here rather than dealing with the summer traffic. Besides my kids, oh, they love having her around. She and Emmy go shopping a lot, and Christian just adores working with her at the salon now that he's got his cosmetology license. Faith groaned. Oh, she's so over the top. I don't know how long I'll be able to deal with her. She's harmless. Danielle patted her arm. So anyway, tomorrow morning when we have our coffee on the deck, we'll point Yoga Goddess out to you. Oh, Faith would not need her to be pointed out. She'd spot that long torso and firm butt with no effort. Faith bent over into the SUV and tugged on a suitcase. I packed for a trip around the world. Nice car. I love the color. Danielle helped her guide the heavy suitcase to the ground. Oh, it's just a rental, which, by the way, I need to return to Avis tomorrow. Stuart got the car in the divorce? No, the squirrels did. Danielle grunted and pulled on the suitcase's handle. It's a long story that's best told over tall glasses of wine. Very tall. Well, I can't wait to hear this story. Danielle wheeled the suitcase away from the SUV. We're going to have a blast this summer. Maybe you'll even find someone interesting down here, she winked. Why on earth would I want to find someone else? Danielle waved her hand up and down the length of Faith's body. Because you've got those curves going on. Besides, you got robbed on the first go-around. Faith couldn't say the same about the curves for Danielle. With not an ounce of fat on her bones, she could eat anything she wanted, unlike Faith, who only had to look at a sugar cube to gain 5 pounds. It's been a year for me. I need to get my life in order before I can even consider treating myself to a manicure, let alone a date. What's your excuse? I already had the best of the best. No one gets that lucky twice in a lifetime. But you haven't had the best yet. Faith stopped Danielle from wheeling her luggage up the driveway. It's been 10 years since Lucas died, sis. It could be 20. It doesn't matter. Time is irrelevant. I have no desire. So that's it? You're just going to dry up and never date again for the next 40 or 50 years? I have friends. I have Lucia. I have Emmy and Christian. I have the salon. And now I have you in Bristol. I'm happy. A peaceful glow rested on her golden face. Oh, and I also have tree removal. Faith scanned her sister, down to her long, polished fake fingernails. What are you talking about? I cut up dead trees and use the wood in my fireplace. Buying wood is expensive. Not that I'm hard up for money, but I hate spending money on things that I don't have to. Like firewood? Yep. Danielle continued to pull the luggage. My friend Alan and I hunt for fallen trees." "Alan, huh?" Danielle laughed. "My friend Alan. We run the Bible studies at St. Joe's on Friday nights. Turns out he loves wood as much as me. It's hard, not to mention unsafe, to cut trees alone in the woods. And he has a pickup truck, so it's a thing we do." "A thing you do." Faith took control of the luggage. She gripped the handle and climbed the steps. "Is she talking about chopping wood?" Lucia asked, coming around the garage entrance carrying a planter box filled with petunias. She lowered it and opened her arms wide, exposing her muddy checkered blouse and freckled chest. Lucia's hair poked out in all directions, the way it had last time Faith had seen her. Plump and wrinkled, she wore her happiness like a charm. "Hey, Lucia!" Faith placed her heavy bag on the steps and walked down to accept the welcome. Lucia squeezed her and then stepped back. "You look like you could use some coffee. A few days in this house and we'll have those bags under your eyes gone like they never existed. Come." Lucia took her hand and led her toward the steps. "And by the way, I think the wood cutting is a cover-up, but she will not admit that. Alan and I are just friends who like to cut wood together. We have a tree to cut up this weekend. It's an old oak that toppled over in someone's front yard a few streets over. You want to help?" she asked Faith. "Hauling wood burns calories, lots of them." Danielle winked. Faith sucked in her stomach, self-conscious of her growing curves, and now apparently dark circles under her eyes. Faith found Bristol lying on her back in her pink bed, hugging a teal journal to her chest. "What do you have, sweetheart?" She sat up and placed the journal on her lap. "It's a diary." Faith glanced at the heart sticker from Danielle. "I used to love my diary." Faith sat down next to her. "I used to write myself a note every night." Bristol traced her finger around the sparkles. "What did you say in it, Mommy?" "I'd write about happy and sometimes sad things. Or when your auntie and I would get mad at each other." Bristol smiled up at her, revealing her missing front tooth. "I like Auntie." All tension from the past year released from Faith's shoulders. "She's a good person, your auntie. She bakes the best cookies." "She sure does." Bristol lifted a napkin from beside her and revealed a pile of them. They both laughed, and they munched on more cookies. "Do you think Auntie knows that I can't talk in front of her?" Faith weighed her daughter's frustration. "I'll be sure to explain it to her. And to Lucia." Bristol bit into her cookie. "Yeah, tell her too." Faith shoved the rest of the cookie in her mouth. "I will." She shifted onto her knees. "No pressure. If you don't want to talk, you don't have to. If you do, then you do." "Okay." Faith looked around the pink room. Danielle didn't skimp on the decor. From the lacy curtains to the miniature table set with teacups, to the adorable stuffed pink teddy bear on the rocking chair next to the canopy bed, the room lifted her spirits. It smelled like fresh rain on a sunny day. "Where's Emmy, Mommy?" "She's with her Aunt Martina at the mall." Faith tapped Bristol's nose. "I hear she likes to make puzzles, too." Panic hung in her daughter's eyes. Faith wished she could carry her daughter's fears for once. She wished she could ease the words out of her. She wished she could create that safe place where words flowed and the shyness evaporated under the sun's warmth. "In good time," the counselor said. "Patience and time." "Want a race to see who can eat a cookie the fastest?" Faith handed her a fresh one. Before Faith could grab one for herself, Bristol had already begun shoving hers into her mouth. "I'm winning," Bristol mumbled as cookie crumbs rained down onto her lap. They busted into giggles, forgetting the uncertainty and emotional baggage for the time being. After leaving Bristol's room, Faith ventured into hers. She sat on a white wicker chair in the guest bedroom, admiring the piece for a few more minutes before she headed back down to join her sister and Lucia. The antique white-framed bed, with its charming louvered accents, boasted sophistication. Everything did, down to the delicate touches of matching washcloths and bath towels her sister put out for her. She picked up a copy of Rhode Island Monthly magazine and thumbed through it. Rhode Island had small-town charm with all its local restaurants that hosted happy hours, festive pathways, decorated with overflowing flower beds and mature, thick-branched trees, and concerts on the bustling waterfront in Providence. Maybe the trip would help her figure out what the hell she would do with the rest of her life.